We have got a lot of things to cover today, so I'm going to try to get right to it. We've got stuff out of Italy. We've got news from here in Florida, all over the place. So without any delay, Italy reported this morning that it's very likely that there could have been 10 times as many cases of coronavirus as actually reported. I hope somebody picks that up and runs with it, because they're not reporting that there have been 10 times as many deaths. What that would mean is that instead of the 64,000 cases and the 6,000 deaths, there would be 640,000 cases and 6,000 deaths. If there were 6,400 deaths, that would be 1%, the death rate, given the fake way that they do the death rate. And I say fake because they just take the amount of dead people, draw a line, and underneath it they put the amount of cases that they've tested and confirmed. And that's how they do the death rate. Not realizing the number, that bottom number could be much higher, way higher, but they don't care about that. Right now, all they care about is scaring you. But if that's the case, and that's what's being reported out of Italy, as far as countries go, they would be safer than South Korea. How can I say that? Well, let's go to the article and let's read. And that's here on Reuters from 17 minutes ago. Number of cases of coronavirus in Italy probably 10 times higher than the official tally, head of the agency collating the data said. A ratio of 1 certified case out of every 10 is credible. Angelo Borelli, the head of the Civil Protection Agency, told La Repubblica, meaning 640,000 people could have been infected. That would make what they call their death rate less than 1%, far less than 1%. Right now in South Korea, using the same model, it's 1.1, 1.2, something like that. And let's go back to this real quick. I'm sure we've seen this so many times, it's getting nauseating. But let's apply the current rules they're using in the mainstream media to other diseases. And it'll show how ridiculous the story is. So if the rule is, if somebody is currently sick with something, or has ever had it, or has died of it, or gotten better, whatever, you can report it as a case. Do you know what these numbers would look like if we applied this to malaria? Over half of the population of people who have ever lived on the planet have died of malaria. I could report 57 billion deaths in this model. I could report, a much larger number of cases. Apply this to any disease. If I applied this to dengue, you wouldn't feel safe anywhere. See the problem with what they're doing? And I really do want to applaud Worldometers for putting this number up here in a really light shade of gray and putting the recovered discharge in green and showing what we really need to be paying attention to down here. The deaths and the serious or critical. Still this paltry 29,000 number. And this has been going on for months and months now. Now, the reason I started in Florida with this picture is there's 2 reasons. Here in Florida, we have homeless, just like everyone else does. You would think, based on what they're saying, is the riskiest behavior that you can engage in, we would be seeing large swaths of the homeless population kicking over dead, whether here, New York, Baltimore, anywhere else, but we don't, do we? There are homeless here in Florida that won't take a home if you gave it to them. Because they're here, especially in St. Augustine, just north of here, there's a lot of wealthy people, and a lot of wealthy people with very good hearts. And any homeless person in St. Augustine who came to the authorities and said, I need a place tonight, there would be a room with a clean bed, with sheets, with hot and cold running water, and food waiting for them. For every homeless person who would ask, every night. They have arranged some older buildings and some older hotels, and they have outfitted them, and they have paid for it. So if you don't want to be homeless in St. Augustine, Florida, there will be accommodation provided for you. They'll even transport you there. They'll send an Uber to come pick you up, and they will take you there. You'll walk in, there'll be a meal provided, there'll be a bed to sleep in, it'll be a climate-controlled room, meaning heat and or air conditioning. There will be medical care provided. Now, what else is going on? What other proof do you have, McKee, that the government in this country is not planning on there being this millions of death event? They would have been already arranging for the bodies. And there would be video of it up here on YouTube, I guarantee it. Because somebody would have to go dig those graves. Remember the shot of the mass graves in Iran with the satellite photo? They'd have to be hiring somebody here to go out and discreetly start digging graves in graveyards. And I know what a lot of you are thinking, and you're already typing. Well, they have these mass holes, they're just going to dump the bodies. That goes to narcissism. Because the vast majority of the people on here who are the keyboard warriors who would say something like that are the biggest narcissists on the planet. Because they think, okay, well, there's me, and then there's my friends, and then there's the few people that they know, but everybody else in the world is a stick figure that can be dumped in a grave that doesn't have any family who loves them or cares for them or wants to see them buried properly. That would never happen. It's not going to happen. Nobody is digging graves. Millions of them. Mortuaries aren't preparing to be overflowed. The only place where there's any kind of weird accommodation being done for the dead is in Italy, unfortunately, and they've opened an ice rink. But that's not being done here. And there they're talking about thousands of dead. Here, the gloom and doomers, the big scare channels are talking about millions. And there's not going to be millions. There's not even going to be hundreds of thousands. When we look back at this, and we look at the statistics from 2020, and we look at all of the causes of death from all things, coronavirus isn't going to be number one. It's not going to even be number two. But the reaction, the panic, the complete ridiculousness that shows how inept DC is, that's going to be talked about for a long time. Because the real important story here is this, to my mind. Every state had the ability to react to this in its own way. Florida doesn't have the lockdown that other states do. It has no call. I think we have 1,500 cases. The number of dead is still well under 100. We're one of the most populous states in the union. If anybody should have been hit by this by now, in a real critical way, it should have been Florida. Why? Massive amounts of elderly people. Probably per capita more elderly people than anywhere except for perhaps Arizona. And I still think we got more per capita. They might per capita have more because they have a lower population. But as far as grand total, they're the most at-risk group of people, right? The elderly, can we agree on that? And Florida is old people soup. And there's no mandatory lockdown orders. I can go to the grocery store right now, and yesterday I saw my first 2 masks. And it wasn't employees of the grocery store. People are walking around, laughing, joking, standing in line. Saw a couple holding hands. I wanted to go up and tell them they're heroes. Seriously. If there were anywhere in this country, you would think this would have already hit by now. In an epic way, it would be here in Florida. But it hasn't. And that's the biggest fake news proof we have that this is fake news. Look, New York is having a problem. They live on top of each other up there, but even take their numbers. And instead of taking their reported cases as the number you put under the line when you do your division, put it against their entire population. Not only of the city, but of the entire state. Seriously. These numbers are, and for those of you who have lost loved ones within the sound of my voice, yeah, your world has been rocked. I just buried one of my own, not of this. I'm 50 years old and I have already buried my mom, my dad, all of my grandparents, 3 cousins, guys I knew in the military, friends. I understand losing a loved one is horrible, but what about all of those people that have, in this period of time, lost loved ones from other causes? Car accidents, heart attacks, pneumonia, smoking-related diseases. Are their loved ones not special? Are their loved ones not as missed? That they don't warrant this type of attention? Everybody's gearing up and ramping up the medical system now to deal with this. I'll bet there are people out there it's like, well, if we had the ability to do this, my loved one died of the flu last year. Why didn't we do it last year when my loved one died of this other thing? You see, that's a question nobody wants to ask. Why we're doing this now because of this when the numbers don't warrant it. You can't say that, Mickey. They do warrant, really? The first thing the governor of New York said when he first started talking about this over a week ago, the numbers don't justify the panic. The numbers don't justify the panic. And I'm going to stand by that. Do you realize that in Hubei province, China, they have lifted the lockdown? In Hubei province, China, where Wuhan is located, they have lifted the lockdown. And life is returning to normal. And it's not even April yet. We're behind them probably about a month on this. So I'll stand by. Late May, June, far in the rearview mirror. July, August. That's when the finger pointing is going to be. I'm glad people are getting checks, don't get me wrong. But this was a giant nothing burger. And I will leave with my specific definition of nothing burger. Nothing burger doesn't mean there wasn't a virus. Of course there was. Coronavirus comes around every year. Nothing burger doesn't mean that it didn't hit certain areas harder this year than others. Nothing burger means they reacted as if this were an event that could kill the world, so to speak. The coronavirus didn't, their reaction did. The coronavirus didn't, their reaction to it did. You know what it kind of reminds me of? I had mentioned this in another video, and I got away from it. I said it reminds me of 9/11 in the sense of, do you remember Building 7 that they demolished on purpose? and that they said they didn't demolish on purpose? Personally, my opinion on 9/11 is that were those buildings hit? Yes. Did they know those buildings were going to be hit at some point in the future? Yes. I personally believe that over the period of time between 93 and 2001, they rigged those buildings to come down in case they were hit so that they could bring them down in a controlled manner. And they did that with all of the buildings in the region so that they could control the disaster. That's what happened here. They tried to control the disaster, and by attempting to do it, made it way worse than what it was. This is just another version of that, where the government stepped in and created a massive panic and a massive disaster where one really didn't occur. And the ramifications of that are going to be talked about for some time. But, like I said, explain Florida. Why everybody's fine here. And it's already been here. It's not like it hasn't hit. And we have more old people than anyone. Like, share, subscribe.